All right, so it looks like we're recording, so we'll officially begin the meeting. Although, do we know, is Konnette planning to be here?
Yeah, she's been trying to get in, so.
Okay. Well, then I'll just restate what I said a minute ago, which is if you go, I'll take a look at the minutes that were emailed out and see if there are any changes, additions, subtractions that you want to make.
Do you need a motion to accept them?
I do need that.
I shall give you that.
Is there a second? There you go. Okay. And just now that we're on the record, mentioned there were a couple of errors in terms of spelling of names that'll be fixed, but nothing substantive anyone seeing?
Correct.
Okay, then I'd accept, or so let's do it by vote. All in favor of accepting the minutes with the changes to correct people's spelling of names, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. So the motion carries. Now, on the agenda, next up is the council update, but I don't know if Councilor Mitchell is going to be here. So Jahmai, is there any update from the city that you might have for us?
Yeah, I'll give you just the kind of the regular city update.
Great.
Pull that. Yay. Let's see, guys. Can you believe that it is November already? Like that to me is pretty amazing. All right, so here's the city update. So for those who didn't know, we are currently, the city has been operating in what's called remote virtual. And so the services have been kind of changed. So there's online, and it's a combination of online and by appointment. I have a phone call that might be Councilor Mitchell. Hold on. City of Beaverton, Jahmai speaking. Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm clicking admit, but it's giving some, like, I mean, it just says that you're joining. Okay. That happened to Brian. He had to download again. All right. Cool. All right. Thank you, Konnette. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Bye. All right. That was Konnette. But anyhow, city's operating under like remote services. So until December 31st, at least, just due to COVID, most public buildings are not open to the public, with the exception of there's some library community services that are available. So there's like a computer lab that for people who need to use that. And then also passports are available, but that's by appointment only. And then the library has what's called BCL to go, which is, I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it's basically you pull your car up, like you can go online and figure out what sorts of materials you want. You pull up in your car and they just drop it right off. They have like a bag for you to pick up, or they'll drop it in your car if you need to. And the computer lab that I mentioned, it is open Tuesdays and Wednesdays at certain times. So it's available for printing if you have any printing that you need to take care of, or for those that might be applying for services. It makes it available for others. Konnette's trying to join still. So, and then last, utility billing assistance is available. So there is that. That is something that's from through December 30th, and it's administered by Community Action of Washington County. And so for that, you can just go to cao.wash or caowash.org to get more information. And beyond that, I will let you know, had got for sure some news, as I kind of talked about a little bit in advance. We are for sure going to be doing outreach, all of that good stuff in 2021. That is a guarantee, regardless of if we have a zombie apocalypse or anything else. Like, we're going to be doing that. So how that's going to look, we don't know for certain. Oh, you lost me. Okay. All right, are you guys still there?
Yeah, Jahmai, your picture is, but
You're
you're
cutting
back.
in and out, Jahmai.
Okay, hold on, I'm gonna change one thing. Hopefully that's better. All right.
Much better.
Yeah, good. I switched my network. But anyhow, we for sure are going to be doing outreach in 2021. And that's if we have zombie apocalypse, snowstorms, all that stuff, we're going to do it. So, yeah. We know that there is going to be, of course, we have a change of administration. Like, we are going to be switching from strong mayor to city manager. And so with that, the work that we do, what is requested from the VAC is to come up with a list of recommendations of how to proceed in 2021. And so that's something that probably in the end of January or February, we'll have a list to give to council for and the city manager, because it wouldn't be immediately in January because that's when all the changes are gonna happen. But we're gonna give the city manager a list and city council of, hey, here's the ways that we want to kind of move forward. With that, some of the discussion that happens today regarding outreach is pretty critical. And I'm gonna admit Konnette again. Then the other, hello, yeah. And also the other thing is, I have a list of plans, various plans from other cities and communities for us to take a look at. So I'll probably administer that via email, but the question is, the desire is for the VAC to take a look at those plans and see what are some things that you think are great about them, and what would you like to incorporate into any future plans. Does anyone have questions about what 2021 might look like, or what is requested of the VAC?
Jahmai, were you saying that in January, as far as this outreach goes, that the VAC is being asked to tell City Council how it wants to continue as a committee, like what it sees its role as under the new form of government?
Yeah, I know that probably sounds confusing, but new form of government and all that stuff aside, like what is asked right now for the end of January or early February, whenever we get time with the council, the VAC will give the new council a list of recommendations saying we're going to proceed in doing outreach in 2021. So that might be, knowing that conditions are going to be weird, it might be, hey, you know what? We're not going to shoot for talking to 10,000 people. we're going to try to keep it at 2,000, but concentrated to make sure that it's representative of more of the community, you know, or saying, you know, we want to have more digital outreach with certain in-person or, you know, other methods. So they want to see the VAC give basically like a one-pager that says, here's what we want to do. And then they will give the yay, go for it. Or they'll say, hey, you know what we recommend is for sure speaking with this new community organization. Or they'll say, you know, are you planning to talk to businesses at all? Or, you know, they'll have kind of various questions and things that they want to add. But similar to, I shared a lot of the work in the document that that Brian has been putting together. And that is right up the alley of what that we would present to them, you know, a more condensed version of that, but like, hey, here's some of the things that, you know, we are thinking, some of the questions. So they're going to be excited about that.
So Jahmai, thinking long-term then, in February, we'll give them this information. And then by what time are we expected to have the outreach complete? And then from there, by what time are we supposed to have the new vision complete?
They're fluid, you know, meaning they're fluid in how we do that, knowing that we don't know for certain what barriers we'll have, you know, and it's not like we have the time, you know, we have summer events where there'll be, you know, 400,000 people that we can talk to all over. So I think that if what you as the VAC present as far as what goals you would like, I can help you kind of craft that. But, you know, if you say, hey, you know what, we want to have a plan on, you know, on people's, you know, dining room tables by October, then we just hustle to make that happen, you know. But as far as the time frame, I think that they would probably be more liberal with a longer time frame of doing outreach and data compilation, because of the fact that there's some limitations with, you know, it takes a little bit more work to reach various community members.
Okay. And then another follow-up in that same vein, we discussed a number of times before about getting a consultant to help us craft these questions and put things together. When about do you expect that to be? Because that seems to be sort of a first piece or a beginning piece to the puzzle. When do we expect that all to happen?
Yeah, that is something that, that again, I think they're doing budgeting right now. And I had requested, hey, can we get like some you know, our requests for proposals or, you know, like just do something like that for some various ones for the VAC to look at. So, cool. I mean, like very soon, you know, I don't know, you know, how quick that turnaround is going to be, but like, I would imagine before you speak to council in January, February, you'll have some, maybe the January meeting, you might have some, you know, some folks to look at as, okay, these people are great with data, but they aren't great with outreach, or these people are really good with helping to craft questions, you know, but they don't have much experience in the Northwest, or, you know, you kind of have some things to kind of figure out. So I think I'd say January is probably a good time frame to say you'll be looking at what a consultant will look like and what the needs are.
Okay, and then final thing from me, and then we can progress, I promise, unless other people have questions. If this were not a COVID year, because obviously who knows what COVID means in terms of delays and things, but just to have a baseline, how many months of actual outreach as opposed to planning for outreach and then compilation after the fact do you think is typical?
So it wasn't so much based on months or time frame. It was based on number of people, like a metric of people, and that's what's going to change this year. So, you know, last time we said, what do we need to do to get 5,000 people? And so we're like, okay, there's this event that's happening. There's, this event that we can put on. There's, these. So we kind of built it around what it would take to get 5,000 people. That doesn't have to be the route that you go this time around. If you say, hey, you know what do we need to do to reach a good representation of, of the Beaverton community? So keeping in mind, like, it might take creating a special event for reaching some of the underrepresented groups. It could be latching on to something that someone else is doing. If you know for a fact that, like, hey, LC Store Center will be opening up and having like a special event that's happening in July, then that might be when you need to do that thing, so it's, but to give you an idea of time frame, like, I think it was from the first round of outreach was in, let's see, May, I want to say. And it was like May, June, July, and then I think that it ended before, so it was like probably 4 months altogether. Like, that was like
Okay.
the period. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Anyone else have questions before we move forward?
Are we going to be working with diversity board?
Okay.
So
question.
I can definitely say yes to that. I think that the DEI plan in itself will give us some information about methods of outreach. And then also we will definitely do actual consultancy from the DAB. I think there will be, whether it's they have some members or, their staff liaison comes to kind of give some guidance, but there definitely will be that. Another group too, I think Brian had mentioned too, as kind of like a thought for the VAC. I mean, there's also the BCOA, so which they champion age, various age demographics, and so I think that like the aging community is another demographic that we could probably gain some insight on, and so I think any and all boards and commissions, we can utilize them as a resource, but in particular earmarked are DAB and BCOA.
Because what I was thinking about is, because I know this is like my last year and I'm not planning on renewal. So for next year, let's say, if you wanted to host like a Mandarin session where we could do a Zoom and everything is in Chinese and you want to get some feedback from people, I'll be happy to do that in like a language specific community events for residents, around the city of Beaverton. And so I was wondering within the diversity advisory board, if they have different community that they belong to, that they could also host a language specific ones, then that will be a good way to outreach to the community, talking to somebody that they are already familiar with. And then they could take notes or something. So just throw that out, since I'm not going to be here, but I'll be happy to host one afterwards.
So here's the thing, like when you leave the VAC, you never leave the VAC. That's just, but I can guarantee that we'll be taking you up on that. Like, I don't want to speak for all of the VAC, but like, I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that everyone here would say, yeah, that's a great idea. So, and if you're a resource that's available, then by all means. And having the DAB dip into their communities, like that's not the reason why they're here, but that is like a great, like they can help make those connections, and I think that's important. Thank you, Meng.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else have anything on that vein before we move forward? All right, well, we are 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Good job, team. So next, thinking back to September, because it was a while ago now. If you have the agenda with you, you can follow along. But we want to think about in particular before we move on to the next set of topics. Last time we were talking about the different issue areas that were important to us and the types of questions or the type of information we were trying to get beyond that. And I've got this giant raw information document that now is like 8 pages long or something ridiculous like that we'll work to put into something more succinct. But before I do that, what's going to be important for us to discuss is what is particularly important. Because all of it obviously is important to some degree. But I'd like to hear from you all in a not too structured format, so people should feel free to share how they feel comfortable. Are there particular issues that you think are more important than others? Maybe issues that touch across different communities more, or issues that are really connecting issues between, for instance, we had a lot of discussion about the experience of folks who have immigrated here from another country, or who are people of color, represent other diverse interest groups, and their experiences with getting information from the city, whether that's about city events and important updates like utility billing and how to do all that, and also how you experience public safety and what that means to you. And so, like, one thing I would think is that would be a particularly important thing to highlight for whoever our consultant will be, because it touches so many different issue areas. That's something we want to highlight. Do people have other ideas about what's important, what's particularly important? And take a minute to think. Don't feel silence often makes people feel uncomfortable and pressure to just say stuff. So feel free to take a minute to think, because we're doing all right on time.
I do have a suggestion. So I know with City of Beaverton, was it a quarter of the population was people was it immigrants or people who weren't born here, or I forgot what that was.
Yeah, so yes, it is. It's like a quarter, I think, is people who come from outside of the United States.
Okay. Yeah, so I was wondering if one of the goals that we could have is we should also aim for a quarter of the survey should be people who move into Beaverton, who's not born here or raised here, so that we could get, a fair amount of good statistics and surveys from the community as well.
So
I think that's great.
I'm a little confused by your question, Brian.
Sorry.
Were you asking us to highlight areas in which we want to do outreach, like as in groups of people or organizations, or were you asking about highlighting the important specific categories that we had discussed at that last meeting?
Thank you for clarifying. And it's mostly about what I want to hear about are the issue areas, whether it's particular issues, as small as, say, like promoting multimodal transportation or giving people's thoughts on, buses versus bike lanes and things like that, all the way up to fairly larger conceptual ideas of, like Meng said, Beaverton is an immigrant community, and that means a lot of different things because our people here come from a lot of different countries and backgrounds, and that's something we need to be mindful of as we're doing our outreach, and also in terms of the issues that we should be focusing on. And so sort of anywhere between those posts, things that you think are particularly important, it'd be nice to have that highlight so we can help condense all the raw information that we have.
What I'm wondering is,
or did I just restate myself?
No, I understand. And what I'm wondering is maybe some of that work is already done in terms of priorities by the previous community vision plan.
Well, so that's something that we're working on the new one. And I think that the previous one is great as a guidepost. And if there are things in there you think we need to re-up this as something important, then yeah, let's throw it in. But I just want to make sure people have the opportunity to speak about things beyond that and not feel constrained by necessarily the old plan.
Okay.
But I agree with you. I think that is important, an important reference.
So Brian, I think like in my brain, the big pillars or just the things that resonated with me were affordable housing, public safety, climate change, and diversity.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're going for, but.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Another one that jumps out at me is accessibility, and that has various meanings, but I'm thinking of things that we as a government can do to be more accessible to the populace, accessibility of the government to the community. A lot of the things we've talked about kind of come back to that. It's particularly like Meng's issues that she brings up about the diversity and the ethnic issues, that has an accessibility component. Just lots of things come back to that issue.
Thank you. And if I look sort of dead-eyed as you're talking to me, it's because I'm typing notes at the same time and not looking into the camera.
I'm not looking at your dead eyes.
Okay, perfect.
Can we narrow it down a little further? Maybe accessibility to city services during this COVID time, because during the COVID, a lot of services are kind of off limits because you can't access the different departments. So how to get to those?
Are we only surveying people who are 18 and over?
What's that?
I was asking about the age. Jahmai shaking his head. I asked if we're only surveying people 18 and over.
No, we did survey like all ages. We had kids, and we went into like high school, you know, and spoke with kids. And also whenever anyone came to like a picnic, we'd ask the kids what they have to say too. Yep.
Okay, so what I have so far to recap, and someone shouted, Meng brought up both in terms of the issues that are important, but then also making sure we get a representative sample of folks in our survey. Public safety, diversity, transportation, affordable housing, and accessibility of the government to the community, and that being in a variety of ways, both in terms of thinking of different groups of people, residents generally, COVID-related accessibility, getting services online, stuff like that. Any ideas that I missed that we've said, or any other things?
There's one idea that we often talk about, but I'm not sure if we've ever put it in words. That has to do with this vague concept of being a community.
Okay.
And just what is the definition of that? What do people mean by it? When you have pride in being a Beavertonian, what does that mean? It's kind of a vague concept, but it also is, has a lot of implications.
I'm just curious about, since we're not going to be gathering data from people who show up at events, we're not going to get that. Well, we're not going to get people who self-select into that, but are we going to be sending out things through physical mail, email, inviting people to sign up on the website? Like, who's going to slip through the cracks? Like, are our Beavertonians who are experiencing homelessness, is there a way we're still going to reach them? Yeah.
Good ideas. I'll put that down.
Is there a way for people to request paper copies? And also put either like the survey link or QR code or how to request a paper copy on the City of Beaverton newsletter?
I'm sure that's something we can do, Jahmai.
I definitely can make sure that that happens. In the past, we did a survey in every single newsletter, like a paper copy, and it was prepaid mail. So that way, no one had to worry about paying for postage. So that's one option. But then a QR code, that's something we can do now. We have the, you know, the technology to make sure it's a secure QR code. So that's fine.
Brian, did health get on that list?
I don't think it did, but I can add it. Is there something you have in mind when you say health?
Well, I was just going back through the questions that we did from 2 meetings ago, or maybe it was just 1 meeting ago.
Yes.
And the health portion was a large piece of it. It had lots of different parts.
It does have a lot of different pieces.
So it seems like that stands out a lot. And especially like Cameron mentioned about accessibility around COVID resources, health specifically comes into play.
So yeah, in that conversation, we talked about access to healthcare and learning where people receive their healthcare, and also asking about mental health care. And we include under that umbrella food stability and access to food banks, community gardens, and the COVID response.
Right.
Okay. All right, so we've got a good list here, and I think I'd agree. These are the things that I would write down too. The public safety, diversity, transportation, affordable housing, immigration issues, accessibility of the government to the community. What does it mean to be a Beavertonian, and so get a better understanding of how people conceptualize of our community, and then health. Is there anything that's missing from that, or are we good to move forward?
I think we're good.
All right. So the next step, so whole fresh thing we haven't really talked about a whole lot. But
send us that list somehow.
Yes, I will be. After this, we'll have a whole bunch of stuff, and I'll have a raw data sheet, and I'll send you the raw data. And I'm also trying to, what I've been toying with our information from last time is putting it into a narrative format, something that once we get why am I blanking on the word? A consultant, we can actually hand to them, so that in addition to the raw data, they can get a better idea of what the meaning is behind that and the story that we're trying to capture. And I will also give that document to you. So you all will have all the documents that I have as well.
Okay.
So the next thing that we got a little bit of an introduction to, and thinking about what Beavertonians will slip through the cracks given the COVID restrictions and lack of gatherings and things like that, is how are we going to get to people? How are we going to talk to them? How are we going to create opportunities for them to come to us? Where should we go? Or what resources can we use to figure out where to go to meet people where they're at? And I think this will be a very interesting discussion, because I'm sure you all have a bajillion different groups you're associated with, and we'll have some good ideas about what to do. So with that, anyone have any thoughts or ideas or concerns that we should be keeping in mind as we go forward?
I think within City of Beaverton limits, there's a lot of nonprofit organizations, especially the one that deals with, minorities. They already have their own list of mailing people, a mailing list of people that they could reach out to. And that brings up a question. So on the surveys, are we only surveying residents or businesses that it's here but doesn't live in City of Beaverton, and then people who visit City of Beaverton? What are we trying to get?
What do you all think about that?
Well, don't we have a large partner list of organizations that we have a starting place already.
We do.
I don't know how many people are on that list, but it must be somewhere around 60 or.
Absolutely.
That's the number, 60, yeah.
And it seems like it would be helpful for someone to start with that list and see whether they are still viable. Are they good candidates for reaching out to? How do we specifically reach out to them? Some of them will be different, how we reach each different group will take a different plan.
Absolutely. And before we move to, I agree with that. And before we move too much further, I want to talk about what Meng had to say about whether, how restrict, who are we targeting here? And I think that we should be targeting pretty much anyone that actually has a connection to Beaverton, because even if they don't live here, this place is sort of for them. And I don't think there's a reason to exclude folks. But do people have an idea about the general population we want to target?
Including business owners is a great idea, especially thinking about, I don't know if we want to prioritize, but thinking about those who have taken advantage of like the storefront improvement program or other grant opportunities, people who are really invested in, making their business home in Beaverton, even if they don't live here, for their residents.
Jennifer, I lost you on the last half of what you said.
I was just saying that I think it's a great idea to include business owners, especially like the ones who have participated in the city of Beaverton, like grant programs and storefront improvement and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be as inclusive as possible, because then, I mean, it's us getting information, but it's also a tool for people to feel connected and more invested, and that will, return itself in dividends as well. Back to reaching out to the list of partners that we have, I wonder if we can send an email out to them just saying, hey, we're about to enter a year of outreach. We want to make this as easy as possible for people to participate. Can you let us know if there's meetings that we can get on agendas ahead of time? Like, I don't want to force ourselves into spaces, but if we can be like a planned part of things that are already happening for people and us go there, that might make it more welcoming.
I agree with Sarah. I think for us to ask to join what they are already doing, we are more likely to get participation.
That's a great point. And that brings up a question for me. Are we planning to do focus groups in addition to like more formal surveys?
That's a good question. I know in the past there've been, or Jahmai, you unmuted. I think you have better information than I do. Go for it.
I was going to say, let's shift the language from "are we going to" or to "should we." Let's I wouldn't don't put any brakes on any thoughts that you might have and questions. I'll tell you what we've done, but what you want to do is entirely your script.
I like the idea of having focus groups, especially if, knock on wood, maybe we get a vaccine in the spring and by summer we get somewhat back to normal. But if we don't, especially, I'm sure we could arrange through Zoom or with a socially distant group of a smaller number of people, a way to have a more in-depth discussion that could compensate for us not having larger scale meetings in person. Because something's just sort of lost when you don't have any conversation and it's just down to filling out a form. So I think that's a good idea.
And I wonder at what stage it makes sense to do focus groups, because we could say we want to do it where there's a blank slate and we don't have any information yet, or we could do some raw data gathering, put it into some cohesive form and have something for people to respond to. And then the other thing about focus groups is, I was listening to this podcast the other day where they were talking about a workshop that they did like in Brooklyn, and it was in person, of course, before COVID, but they had it, the consultants they used, I don't know if everyone had earpieces or what, but there were multiple different languages happening at the same time. Like English wasn't the dominant thing by any means. And so everyone was participating in real time in the way that made the most sense. So I don't know, we maybe put something like that in the RFP and see if that technology is available.
Yeah, I've actually attended a meeting on Zoom recently where there are different levels of Zoom, and there was a specific level that has different languages that it's available. And so they had different translator on different line. And so on the like where I think it was next to share screen option or something, you could actually select the language that you want to listen to, and then you could pick if you want to do English and that other language, or turn off the English and just listen to that one language, have simultaneous translation that it's happening.
That's really cool.
Wow.
I had a suggestion about attending the different neighborhood association meetings.
Great.
Yeah, a lot of times people come to those meetings when they don't know where else to go, and they all have their own different flavor of constituencies and membership. So that would be and they do also, to Sarah's point, have meetings already set up. So
Yeah, I think I think reaching out to the NACs and the other boards and committees of the city I think that's a great idea.
I wonder if it's possible to go into like high school or talk to history or social study classes and things like that, and ask for like a session of class to do this type of survey. Just to get inputs from high school.
Just tell them.
Sorry.
Wade laughs at me as a teacher who knows better.
Scouts also have some kind of requirement for government involvement.
I was just going to say that, Christy, is should we also involve some of our government partners and even council people and things like that? I think that we ask people to do a lot and assume that we're all on the same page.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, actually,
Yeah,
go for it.
Jahmai.
Well, I was going to say, I think that is something that I, as a staff liaison, like I wish that I could have gotten the elected officials involved more. You know, I think having them, because they have their own audiences and they've got, you know, their own people that their own communities. So having them engaged more and having them, if they do like a town hall or they do whatever, like I think that would be useful.
You kind of cut out for me at least.
Sorry, I can type it if that helps.
I hear you.
You're back.
Oh, good. Well, I was just going to say, one of the things that I wish that in the past was using the elected officials more, having them host a town hall or, you know, because they have their own communities. They campaign for like, you know, months and months and months, and they've got these long lists of people that they're hearing things from. So it would be great to say, hey, you know what, everyone, I've got this, you know, where we're planning what the future of Beaverton looks like. Come speak to us at this time. So.
Definitely.
Jahmai, how involved in the past has the city staff been? Because I mean, it's great for us to have ideas and everything, but you all know actually what's kind of achievable and in place already. Is there a review period that you go through after it's done? Okay.
Yeah, so there's this kind of like, you're going to be shaped, like I will be involved in helping you get through the hurdles of the rigmaroles of city of Beaverton, right? I'm your advocate, and like how it's worked is you get all this raw data, right? And that raw data is condensed, and when we get 65 people that say the same thing, it's only counted once, right? Like we say it once to the power of 65 or whatever, but like, so then once we have all of these thousands of ideas, and Meng and Cameron, I think they've both been through this process, you get all these ideas condensed down to, you know, from 7,000 ideas to like, you know, 200. And then from there, it's brought to the city to say, okay, what's doable? What's, you know, like what, you take it to partners after that.
So Brian, one of the tools we've used at the zoo when we're kind of doing a big plan is just creating a stakeholder map. And it's just a visual representation of all the people you want to reach. You know, so you could have businesses, neighborhood association, or whatever all the different things are. And just that might be a tool we could use to then say, okay, for this group, this is the strategy. That might be a good way to present it when we have to go in front of council in February.
Do you have like a sample that you can share with us to see what that looks like? Is it like a web or how does that look?
Hold on, let me dig one up.
Cool.
It's a series of interconnected tubes.
It's not a dump truck.
So while Sarah is searching for something, I was wondering, are we allowed to get a list of phone numbers? You know, like those political campaign, you could actually know the city boundaries. So these people are, you know, these are their contact information for people who actually live within the city of Beaverton limits. And are we allowed to send them like a text message or something? Hey, we're doing a survey, fill this out. Are we allowed to?
The NACs do that, Meng, so I would imagine that we would have some vehicle for that. Is that right, Jahmai?
Yeah, the only reason you wouldn't be able to do that is if you're trying to get them to advocate for like a political position of some sort. But other than that, like if you're saying, hey, I want to know what's on your mind, you could buy a list, you could, you know, do all that stuff. So
And
no
also, I know at least with the NACs, they have different divisions so that you can isolate out the, like a Highland neighborhood and I don't know what other kinds of divisions that you could maybe filter that data, that access. But that would be a good thing to take a look at.
Yeah, that's a good idea because we definitely need some ways to have a broad reach to folks who might not be actively into city message boards or the groups and, you know, local institutions that meet regularly. You know, just like the people who just in farmers market but aren't going now because of COVID, stuff like that.
I will say
just
one
out of
thing.
curiosity, have we done any outreach via social asking?
Oops, Charlie.
Yes.
Oh, I was just wondering if we ever put it on social, you know, social media to get survey responses.
That's a good thing to
In the
look
past,
into.
yeah. And also I have a relationship with a company that they do that like professionally, you know, like they do social media, like not gathering, but like outreach surveys and things. They do that. They know how to like kind of tweak the demographics. So if you're looking for, you know, hey, we want to talk to people who shop at, you know, farmers markets, you know, then they are able to do that.
And it's not that expensive either, is it, Jahmai? We did some booths for our neighborhood association and they were like $25 and I was amazed.
Now that the election year, like that stuff's done, it's going to be a lot cheaper. This year, it was like phenomenally expensive, like phenomenally, but out of an election year, you're good. Yeah.
Other thoughts, ideas?
Well, it occurs to me that if we're going to go to some of these organizations and asked to be put on their agenda, then it occurs to me it would be wise for us to be very prepared for that. And and consistent, so that when we walk in or show up on their screen or walk into their room, whatever it is, that they know that we're going to do about a 4 or 5 minute presentation, and then we're going to ask a series of questions. But in our heads, we should know kind of what those questions are going to be.
Yes.
So, and it shouldn't be too overwhelming. I mean, giving them a list of 100 questions is not going to be very helpful. So it just occurs to me that would be an area where it would be wise for us to spend a considerable amount of focus time, is coming to some agreement with that set of 5 or 6 questions or something, whatever it is.
I agree. I think that whether it's something, we may have a few questions that we ask all the groups if we're going to meet a group, so that way we know these ones we get, but also we might have some that are focused to the particular group type. And then I think one thing we do is I assume we'll have a link to the long form of the survey, and we find some way to leave that with them. We go and say, please also do this. And some percentage of them will, and some won't. But I agree. I think that's something where, especially once we get a consultant to work down what are really the core questions we need to ask and record the answers to understand what people are thinking. Yeah. And then I saw Sarah shared the document here of what do you call it? Was it a stakeholder map? Is that how you refer to it? Yeah, stakeholder map. That's really cool. Yeah, I think something like this could be helpful for us to put together.
Yeah, it was just kind of a good visual tool to make sure you weren't forgetting certain groups, or kind of how to strategize. Like with internal people, we just had it at our all staff meeting and did an exercise, but with some of the external folks, we had to figure out different strategies.
And when we do one, I hope that we will also have an elephant and a bear on ours in the watermark.
There's lots of animals in Beaverton.
There are.
One of the other things that we do at Metro when we're engaging with folks is, especially if it's for a longer session, we definitely, provide childcare, which I know City of Beaverton does a lot, and also offer stipends. So if people are coming, they're volunteering a good chunk of their time. I think it's a good idea to pay people for that.
In fact, that can be maybe, do you all think it would be effective if we had some sort of like raffle giveaway to some number of people who filled out like the long form survey? Do you think that would get more people to fill it out than otherwise would? Or would it just be the same people, but hoping to get a prize? I don't know. I don't know anything about that.
We need to have some discussion of what we mean by the long form.
Well, I mean, so we'll have a number of ways that we communicate with folks. And I anticipate that one way that we'll have is a fairly lengthy questionnaire that would be accessible online. And whatever that ends up being, whatever the online survey ends up being, that's going to be the one that we're going to want to get as many people as possible, because we can just send it in a million different ways to get people to react to it. And I'm wondering if there's a way to boost the number of people who will sit down to take it. If like, now this would be out of the realm of possibilities, but like you win a car, we're not going to.
How about like a $20 credit on your water bill or something?
Right, exactly. Something really exciting like that.
I will say they did an iPad in the past, and that was like, I think when they were like kind of brand new, like it was, yeah. So they did that. And then also when you talk about working with partners, sometimes partners can offer something like free CPR classes, like whatever it is. So incentivization is always a key component of gamification, right? Like of getting people to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we have like different topics, you get a raffle or one chance to get in for drawing. If you fill out one section, if there's 5, you have 5 chances to win something.
Zach.
Well, I have one question.
Yeah, I feel like we're sort of hitting a wall here as it comes to ideas for outreach, and we've talked a lot about how we're going to do it. Since I feel like and does anyone else have other ideas they want to share for how we're going to do it? At least on the top of their heads right now, and we can always revisit this. You email me and Jahmai, and we can add things to the list too. So seeing as I think we've kind of come to the conclusion where for how. Go ahead.
At some point, and maybe you're about to say this, at some point, how do we refine these different areas and thoughts of like, would we put all of the ideas for process and outreach venues and things into a work session or a work group? And then who we're going to contact into something else, maybe a division with aimed at of business people, summit, community, the government piece, and resident piece, or how do we distill this down to something that moves us forward?
So I think good question, and,
You all
and
froze.
oh, can you hear? Are you with us?
Yes.
Hopefully.
Okay. Okay, we're all. I think we're all firing now. All right, so I take this information. We all just sort of threw the spaghetti at the wall, and then once we combine that with what we have from our last time and the next topic I'm going to bring up, which is who do we want to talk to, then we can look at all that and say, okay, of these things, what can we actually do? And from there, that's going to determine our organization, because we'll need to figure out who the consultant is. We'll need to figure out what the city is willing to help us out with, both in terms of budget and tech support and things like that, and what our limitations are. And then from there, it'll get down to, all right, so what can we do? And once we know what we can do, then we know how to divide the labor. And some of that's going to go to the consultant to help us draft the actual questions. Some of that will go to the city for the tech support and to get money. And then some of that, the rest is going to be divided up between us and any volunteers that we can recruit to get it done. And that may be Konnette, that we organize it, like you said, that there'll be some people who like talking to businesses or have good connection to the business community, and they'll reach out to the chambers of commerce and to the local small business owners and people who they already have some connections with, at least in the first or second or third degrees, to get them to participate and see what we can do to come to them. And it also might be that on top of that, we have other folks who are going to be heading up, getting volunteers to go stand outside Fred Meyer on Sunday mornings, or to go to church groups, or to who are friends with some teachers, and they're going to go meet with the PTAs and other groups that can get that information. So I think it's good that you're thinking about that, and I agree that we want to consider how we divide that labor up, especially after we get all these ideas on paper. Do folks have other ideas they want to share in that vein?
Just kind of go off of what you mentioned, Brian. I think it would be kind of good to come up with some kind of baseline metrics on what we consider successful, in terms of our outreach efforts, so that we can kind of try to decide how we're going to focus our efforts and time towards what activities.
Yes, I think that's super important.
And I think one thing we touched on it. I mean, we've talked about diversity, we've talked about representation, but when we look at like population data in Beaverton, like all the different breakdown demographics, like, are we going to try to get like full representation? Like, we want the right percentages of these age groups and ethnicity and income level. Obviously we can't get every category. So at some point we're going to have to say, okay, we want to make sure that at least these 5 demographic areas are represented or whatever. And then from there can say, okay, what's the best way to reach people in each of these demographics?
Yeah, I agree completely. And Jahmai, a question I have for you on that note that maybe you know the answer to, maybe not, is to what extent does the technology allow us to, for instance, if we were to have an online survey, filter by those sort of result types? Because it may be that we get an overrepresentation of a certain type of group of people, but not another. And if we filter by that, it may help, but also we might learn that there's not a particular difference with, say, questions 1 through 5, but there's a big difference with questions 10 through 13. And is that something that we have the capability of doing? I'm so tech illiterate for being a millennial.
So it's all good. Yeah. So yes and no. I mean, like, you know, the data that you get returned is only as good as what's put in. So I mean, like, you know, you're not going to get a lot of demographic data from people if they don't want to include that information. And even then, you know, it's self-selected, right? But yes, you can filter results. You can have people kind of go through a pathway of like a survey if you wanted to, where, for example, I did one of these for the office, like, you know, whether or not you have dependents. Okay, are those dependents like adults or children, or, you know, like, who are you caring for? And then your questions go from there on a different path. And so then you're able to kind of look at like, okay, for those that do have dependents that are, you know, of this age bracket, here's kind of what their answers have been. And, you know, so there's methods to do that.
Okay. And do you find those to be effective? Do they work well?
I think, you know, like, I think that it's important to know why you would want the demographics, you know, like if you have, like, because I do think it's one thing to be able to, we should all have that background that Meng and Charlie have. Like, that's just so cool. But anyhow, I think it's one thing to get demographic information and ask questions, you know, as long as you're getting it as it relates to their experience, you know, and with a goal. If you're asking it just to kind of ask, you know, to make sure that you're getting a good balance, like, that's one thing. But the purpose of finding out and making sure you're having a good balance is as it relates to their life. So to answer that question, like, I think it does add value, but I think it needs to be purposefully used, like with the intent of understanding someone's experience and not just checking a box of, you know, we've reached this number of people.
The difficulty is getting that balance between qualitative and quantitative, and this isn't a scientific experiment that we're doing, so we aren't going to, you know, with a high degree of precision have control over these different groups, but that can still provide really being mindful of what you're, like Brian said, being mindful of what you're actually wanting to tease out, and making sure that it's kind of that you have a good representation of your community is important, and can still give you really good information.
So we've been talking, basically we have like 3 different time frames that we're talking about, you know, like getting the representation ahead of time, what to do with people when they're in the survey, and then what we do with the data after the survey, which I think is all great to talk about. I like the idea that Jahmai suggested, this like choose your own adventure surveying with a specific goal in mind. Like, as we talk about the immigrant, you know, people who are living in Beaverton, having come here from outside of the United States, we might have some really specific questions that we want to ask them about their experience in Beaverton that we don't need to ask everybody because it only applies to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a situation like that, it makes really good sense to have a specific path or a divergence, you know, of a few questions where we want to drill down in a particular area as it relates to that aspect of the demographic.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's a perfect segue into this next part, which is that I want to talk about who it is we want to talk to. Because I think it'd be easy for us to just sort of throw out a internet survey and stand in a few corners to get information. But I think we should make sure that we're hitting all the different corners of our community. And so I think for the next part of the list, I'd like to hear from you all about who should we be talking to and where should we be meeting them?
I want to make sure that we hear from a lot of renters.
You said renters?
Yeah, like, I don't know, a few years ago when I was looking at the data, I was surprised. Isn't it more than 50% of Beaverton residents are renters? That just really surprised me. I don't know how that compares to other cities or other cities who are like us in other ways, but I just thought, wow, that's a really high percentage. And then so many NAC meetings, people talk about that, and neighbors talk about like, well, it's really only homeowners who come to the meetings, or what do we do about the renter? You know, like, anyway, so I just feel like that's a category that I want to make sure that we reach.
Agreed.
I feel like in the orientation to being on the VAC or just any board and commission, there was the presentation that gives you kind of the all about Beaverton. And I wonder if it's worth looking at that to kind of get a sense of, like you're saying, 50% renters. So what other segments do we know about, and do we want to make sure we highlight?
Yeah, Jahmai, is there a way we can get access to that PowerPoint slide or PowerPoint presentation?
The presentation that I made, yeah, I could probably find that for you. Yeah.
You're the one who made that?
Yes, yeah.
That's awesome.
Beaverton 101, yeah.
Perfect.
Do we know when we will be getting that census data for City of Beaverton?
I was going to mention that. So yeah, so we are going, I mean, I don't know how the government's doing things these days, but typically we have that by like around March. You know, like our ACS data usually comes around March. So that's good that you can kind of like go off of that. But then we also have our ACS data from, you know, just 2018, you know, that's going to be more fresh than looking at like the big census data from 2010, right? So, so we do get kind of a year over year. And then also that has things like income. There's also, we have economic reports that tell us like jobs, like what industries people are working in, how many people are jobless, you know, estimated. So there's those sorts of things, that reports that I get too, that can be useful.
That all would be excellent.
It's also occurs to me that the boards and commissions, just looking at the list of the different boards and commissions, will give us an idea of the different groups and interests that are in our community. I mean, the bicycle people, the people working with aging, the library or whatever. So we'll come up with some groups just by looking at those lists.
Maybe age might be, I'm just thinking that age is a great indicator of how you're experiencing the community, whether you are in school or you're not in school, or you're aging in place, and all of the phases of life that a community is the community experience.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's a way to cast a super wide net in the beginning, right? And maybe that's where our partners all email out a survey and the link, or it's attached to your water bill, whatever it is, right? And then we see who we get information back from. And then the next round of outreach, we can say, you know what, we really weren't hitting our targets here. Let's make sure we're going to this age group. Or, you know, we might be able to do it in an iterative process to make sure we're covering all the areas we want to cover.
Great idea.
The age thing also reminds me of dealing with the schools as a group, because you've got different different activities that happen with different age groups. I mean, your preschool kids, their parents are interested in different things than their high school kids' parents are interested in. And so that just looking at the age groups within the schools can help us find some focus of where the parents' interests are.
And I wonder if there's an opportunity with Beaverton School District right now, since, because I think they've done some sort of centralized curriculum that they're pushing out on Seesaw. Like, can we just give them the survey and have them push it out to different students too, if we wanted that information?
Yeah, BSD might do that, you know.
There must be some credit they could get from doing it.
And you know, actually, I would bet the school board members who all have email lists from when they run their campaigns would send this out too.
There's an aspect of it that we always look at age as kind of developmental, but maybe there's something like isolation or connectivity that impacts different ages. You might impact the elderly and a teenager, for instance. That would be fascinating to look for.
Well, I know the isolation issue is a main topic of discussion in the BCOA.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I would, yeah.
All right, other ideas on who to reach out to?
I wonder, go ahead, Meng.
I was thinking about, for a lot of the lower income family, gift card incentive, cash incentive, it's going to be a really big thing for them, especially during COVID. And if people are at home and they could fill out a survey, either online or via telephone, having somebody call them in that specific language for them to get that cash incentive, that would also be very helpful, where you could have one-on-one conversations and you go through certain questions that you think may be important for the renters, or for immigrants, or for whatever community, like elders, seniors, who might not have access to computers. And those one-on-one conversation via phone could be very valuable.
Definitely.
How about with related to the housing, people that have unstable housing, and I don't know if we are able to, I don't know, look at some of our affordable housing venues and target some of, about what's it like to apply, what happens if you lose housing. I think there's a lot of vulnerabilities in that population that would be good to have more crystallized information about.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I think working with our partners, that's the type of information a lot of nonprofits gather. So I'd hate to ask, it might be a little bit of scope creep.
Well, I'd rather have it from the people themselves, though. I mean,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's not as much them having to share their experience, but maybe putting a positive spin on, we're making a better Beaverton, and this is like, what is your perfect Beaverton? Like, what do you need today? Like, would it be useful to have more public bathrooms outside, or what,
I think that would be, positive is great. And what's a barrier for you that if we had a magic wand, that would make your life easier or something like that, yeah.
Well, this is an area where we as a VAC may not be able to reach those people directly, but the partners may have access to those people directly. So we may be asking our partners to conduct the survey component possibly.
Well, again, Wade, partners have a vested interest in those responses. And I just would, I mean, whether it's they're responsible for providing the housing, so they, or they have their own issues related to housing, whereas the people themselves, you know, I think their voice is important and not to filter it.
I don't mean it as a filter. I'm just saying that in terms of numbers and how we're going to get out to everybody, we may have to use the resources that are already there as much as possible.
Could be. Somebody mentioned a focus group, which would be an ideal way to approach the this kind of an audience, I think. And
Yeah,
Brian?
I mean, it's really tricky because you're riding that line. Like, you don't want to put someone in a situation and point out the fact that they're homeless or make them feel vulnerable.
it doesn't have to focus on homeless. I think, I mean, homeless is definitely an obvious visually, but I think there's a lot of people that they're one paycheck away from losing their house, or if they do have to move from a residence, it's not easy for them to get into another one. It takes months sometimes to go through the rental process. We have this thought that that the affordable housing is really working for people, and is it, or
Right.
or is it not? Do they have affordable childcare, and that makes a difference? I don't know, but we're putting a huge investment into the construction of affordable housing. It's a big issue as far as homelessness. It seems like the best information about how someone is doing with maintaining some kind of stable housing is from the people that are having to worry about that, I think.
Brian,
And
I was just gonna
Go
say,
for
can you maybe annotate, like add a note, Project Homeless Connect, and also now I can't think of Just Compassion. So adding those two, like just notating, because those are groups that we work with, and I think that sometimes it might be facilitating the conversation could be something that they could help with.
Yeah.
And
So-
Jahmai, I heard Project Homeless Connect, but I missed the other. What was the other group?
Just Compassion.
Just Compassion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Family products too.
All right, folks. So with that, we're at 7:57. Does anyone have any last thoughts they want to get out here before we do our roundtable and close up? All right. So with that, thank you all. I think this was a super productive discussion. We got a lot accomplished, can be helpful. Before we go to the roundtable, Jahmai, I know sometimes we do and sometimes do not have a December meeting. I think we've got a lot of stuff that we need to do. So I would be in favor of it if other people are willing to. And I think Zoom in some ways makes it easier for folks to schedule. Does anyone have a problem with having a Zoom meeting in December? Is that something we can do, or does the calendar not allow us? Okay.
No, calendar is perfectly fine. And the other one to think about is January, because I think that one's like right when kids are going back to school. It's right after. So I think there should be some kind of meeting that needs to happen. But whether or not, I don't know how it falls on everyone's schedule. But that's something to think about maybe at December, whether or not that's going to happen, when that's going to happen.
Agreed. All right. So with that, let's do, anyone have anything they want to share for the good of the group?
I have a question. How is the recruiting going for the upcoming VAC?
Good question.
I love it. So, so we have, this is one of those weird years where we have like 5 spots that we needed to fill. And so the goal is to have 5 people and an alternate. We've had a dozen people that have applied, which is good. One of the difficulties that we have is residency requirements. So making sure that we're in the cap of under 15%. Like we have kind of a variance of about 15% that can live outside of city limits. But the majority of folks that have applied live within the city boundaries. So I am keeping an eye on knowing, you know, what the needs are going to be for next year, having people who are a little more flexible, who might have different connections with groups that we might not. So, you know, definitely looking at that, and also a list of experience. So I can't give too many details away, but I definitely am, you know, trying to see what's going to be complementing this board. And I want to hopefully see who can make good snacks in case we do meet in person again, because that's like what's most important.
Mission critical.
Yeah. But I'm looking for 5 people plus an alternate. I want to make sure that we have you know, a good stack. Like we've never had an alternate really, so I think that next year, with it being an outreach year, pretty important.
Excellent. Any other questions or any other bits of information to share for the good of the order?
We're having, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I was excited to see the One Book, One Beaverton is coming this month, right?
One book.
Yeah, I think it's either not this weekend, but maybe next weekend. They're handing out the book. I think it's called Just Mercy.
Oh, excellent.
We're going to have the Highland neighborhood's going to have a shredding event. It's a great event for distancing, as it turns out. We were able to find a venue, which has been one of the hardest things to find an outdoor venue for some of these projects, as people are, we're not able to, for instance, set up at the schools right at the moment. So we'll see how it goes.
Anything else?
Is there tree lighting this year?
Is there, Jahmai? Tree
So-
lighting, Jahmai?
Yeah, it's going to be different than previous years. It's not like it's going to be an event with a lot of people that are there, and you know. But I think what the goal is to have like selfie spots, you know, in various parts throughout the city where you can take pictures, because we're trying to encourage physical distancing for people through flu season. But there might be a digital kind of event of like, hey, let's light the tree, and then you know that might be it.
We are going to do zoo lights this year at the zoo, if that scratches your itch. And 2 of the nights we're going to try a drive-through edition. So come to the zoo.
All right, then unless there's anything else, I think we'll end it tonight. Okay, well, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next month.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Hey, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Hey.